got it.
How we work in report, but we can't reach him via cell phone.
Δεν τα διάλογα να τα γράφουμε.
Δεν τη γράφει τώρα.
Μια χαρά γράφει. Ναι, μα γράφει αυτός.
I'm going to do a short video on a project I'm involved with. Term of Human Agent Collective came actually from this project. It's a project that started about 3 years ago. It's a consortium involving Southampton, Nottingham, and Oxford. So experts from multi-input systems, experts from HCI, experts from machine learning coming together for this project. And it's been really a really interesting experience, and we've really sort of got our hands dirty with sort of interdisciplinary collaboration, really work together, and you get a sense of that from this video in terms of what we're trying to achieve. We also worked a lot with real emergency responders, and I don't know if you've noticed, but some of the logos on this slide actually from the logo at the top is from a company called Rescue Global. It's actually a charity that does emergency response in the real world. So we actually get a really good insights into how people could be using agent technology in the real world. But just to give you an idea of what it means to, what human agent collectives mean from the horse's mouth. So it's a really short video. And it's a long video.
Disasters, the role of information and communication technologies, ICT, is becoming increasingly important. I see lots more people on the ground with phones, with cameras, able to really provide a picture of what's going on the ground. What you want to be able to do in these complex, uncertain, dynamic situations is pull together collections of humans with relevant software support, so relevant software agents, into a team, and that's what we call a human agent collective. And so the ORCID project is very much about the science and the engineering of human agent collectives, so how we can build them, how we can maintain them, and how we can operate them in particular scenarios. Our aim is for the ORCID project and the technologies that we develop to help first responders to make better decisions and ultimately save lives. We've looked at a number of disasters around the world. We've looked at simulations and training exercises that have been run in America and in the UK by disaster response organisations to really understand how it currently works today, what the major challenges are, and how things can be made better. We've done some work with Hampshire County Council in order to be able to construct and simulate how a disaster would play out in that particular scenario. And they have a disaster response plan that they have to put in place. And one of the key challenges here was to be able to have accurate maps and simulations of how people will get out of the area.
So what you're seeing here is the map of Foley Oil Refinery right next to Southampton. And as you can see on this map, there are a number of villages that contain thousands and thousands of people. So when we developed simulations of pedestrians and cars moving out of these disaster areas, and using very powerful computers, we were able to scale those simulations to thousands and thousands of pedestrians and cars. in a real-world deployment of this platform, what you will have is that people will be taking pictures of the area and they will be uploading these with GPS annotations. And that will allow us to keep track of where these buildings and connections are and populate a map with all this information. We can run these simulations in faster than real time. And by doing that, we're able to estimate very accurately how many people will get onto the roads from those buildings, and therefore the congestion settings that will result during evacuation scenario.
In a disaster, there's very little information. Typically, you may or may not know what's caused it. You may or may not know its extent. And so really there is a lack of information there. You don't know who is in the areas or what people there are around, what resources you have at your disposal to be able to understand how you can deal with this problem. In some aspects of disaster response, what you have at your disposal is an unmanned autonomous system. What we're interested in is exploring how the human first responder and these UASs can work together as a really close-knit team.
So I should bring up the terminal. In any kind of disaster, having an aerial view is really invaluable for gathering information about the situation on the ground. Whereas before this was always manned flight, now UAVs are providing this really versatile, cheap alternative for doing this. But at the moment, those kind of platforms are really labour intensive. So someone has to decide, where am I going to fly this thing, what am I going to look at next? Someone else might have to then trawl through all of that video footage in order to figure out, okay, what are the key things here that we're really interested in? So in ORCID, what we're interested in doing is supporting this and allowing more UAVs to be used by fewer people. How can we get the UAVs to decide themselves, what should I look at next, given what I've seen already? So for instance, if I fly up as a UAV and have a look down, if I see something on the ground, I'm not quite sure what it is, should I take a closer look at that, or should I pass that on to a human and say, is this something that we're really interested in? The thing is coordination. So if we have more than one...
Okay, I think that's enough for now. So I hope you get a feeling for what we sort of trying to do in terms of defining a human nature collective and investigating the underpinnings of these systems. And interestingly, in disaster response in this case, we have other videos on how we try to do that with energy systems. And the kind of problems we've been studying mainly in our research group, and many research groups do that across the world. So the Canvas group in USC in America does a lot of work on similar human nature collectives. They may not call it that, but they look at systems where humans are advised by personal agents that tell them to visit certain trains, to catch people who avoid paying for the tickets. They are using similar techniques to protect airports and other important infrastructure. And then that's where agents come into play and work with humans alongside humans. And the typical challenge that we address is that of coordination. And the activity you're going to have to do is related to coordination within a human nature collective. Now, you may have studied coordination techniques in multi-agent systems in various ways, and I'm going to go through and enumerate a number of these techniques that I'm sure some of you will have come across before, and tell you why they don't work for human nature collective, and then get you to think in the group activity how you might get them to work for human nature collective by designing the right interaction mechanisms for them. So typically, multi-agent coordination deals with how you can group people together, you can group humans and agents together to carry out a number of tasks in an environment. They need to be able to carry out those tasks by being robust to failures, and they need to be able to cope with the uncertainty in the environment and react to changes in the environment. In this setting, this sort of changes when you have humans and agents working together. So multi-agent coordination has typically assumed that humans and agents are equivalent. However, when you move to a human-agent problem, human-agent system, you need to consider these things. So, for example, the agent's view of the world is a set of variables, utility functions, constraints on how people can act, or how agents can act in the real world, and networks between these agents, so who can talk to who is grouping with who in the environment. However, humans' view of the world is very different. They see interfaces. They see interfaces to these agents. they have relationships with each other. They have relationships with these agents. They interact with people around them and with these agents and with the environment. So the sort of considerations you have in such systems are much more complex than those you have in simple multi-agent coordination problems. So you may want to try and apply some of your fancy multi-agent coordination techniques. Some of them are listed here. You may want to try and apply auctions and mechanism design if you're dealing with incentives. You may want to apply coalition formation techniques, cooperative games to engineer the interactions within the team, within the coalition. If you have a number of agents dotted around in an area, you may want to use DCOPS, so distributed constraints optimization techniques, to coordinate them, to get them to agree on a set of coordinated actions just by simply exchanging messages with each other. Or you might want to go to the lecture next door and learn about DEC MDPs and POMDPs and decision and uncertainty. Okay? And in this case, I'm talking about the multi-agent mock-up decision processes. So these are mock-up decision processes run by multiple agents to solve a particular decision uncertainty problem. So let's go through each of them and see what they are, what they are about, and what's wrong with them in the context of human agent collectives. What do we need to do to make them work for systems where humans are involved? So if we take, for example, mechanism design, auctions and mechanism design. This is a technique that takes a view of the world that you're trying to optimize social welfare. You're trying to make everyone happy, sort of having a measure of happiness for society, and you're trying to allocate goods or tasks to ensure that everyone is happy in the society. So social welfare maximization. And you try to do that by getting people to reveal truthfully their preferences. So to tell you that they want certain goods and are ready to pay a certain price for a certain goods or certain services, and to tell you that truthfully. So you should not be lying in the system. Otherwise, you end up with a suboptimal allocation. The system should also give incentives to make sure that the users do not get out of the system. They don't try to avoid your system. So that's called individual rationality typically. So they make the non-zero profit by being involved in your mechanism. And the mechanism is efficient, that is, it's optimal. So it maximizes an equation which tells you the sum of each agent's utility. So each agent in the system gets a certain utility, and your goal is to maximize the sum of these utilities. You might try to do that while sort of try to fit those incentives, so you might be paying them to do certain things, and you want to fit that within a certain budget. And that's where the concept of budget balance comes into play. So you want to make sure that you balance your budget, so you're not giving too much away, and therefore having to supply money from outside into your system. And the typical mechanism people use to achieve most of these properties, that is individual rationality, incentive, compatibility, and efficiency, is the Vickrey-Clark's growth mechanism, which they want a Nobel Prize. So this mechanism doesn't achieve budget balance. It can be weekly budget balance. But basically, it guarantees that people will reveal their preferences truthfully, will be incentivized to stay in the system, and that the system will be efficient. But you might have to inject some money into it. Now, what's wrong with this system? What do you think is wrong with this system? So basically, you capture everyone as agents, you model their preferences, you have this equation, you complete an allocation of resources and payments to people. So you tell them you paid X for this amount, for this task or for this product, and then you allocate, you execute the allocation. What's wrong? What are the issues here? Can anyone spot a few issues? No?
Well, humans not always behave rationally.
So they won't always always tell you the truth, or they won't always.
Well, that's another
okay,
issue.
so they might not. Okay.
Yeah, they might not behave rationally. They might be driven by other things apart from cost. That's one thing.
Yeah.
They might not want to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
They might not want to give all the information, all the private information to someone.
Yeah, okay, that's a good one. Another one, maybe? The problem with this system, yeah?
I don't know, you can't scale well with the number of...
Yeah. It's typically computationally challenging to solve these problems because in order to compute the efficient allocation, to compute the efficient payments, the right payments for the individual actors in the system, you need to go through all the possible allocations, excluding a particular agent. So you need to recompute and recompute and recompute in order to determine the payments. And when the problem is a combinatorial exchange or combinatorial auction, that's a very costly exercise. It's very hard to find the optimal solution. So you cannot, in many cases, you try to build this sort of efficient Dietrich-Clark-Schrödinger mechanism, but you can't compute the optimal, you can't compute the solution and guarantee its properties because you can't find the optimal solution, because it's too computationally complex to find the optimal solution. So you need to be aware of that when you try to apply these techniques. So basically the first thing I spotted was that, okay, it assumes a linear unity function. I didn't mention it on the previous slide, but that's what it assumes. Everything is linear. Or if it's not linear, you make some assumptions about the linearity of the non-linearity of the function. The allocation is perfectly executable. That is, you assume that once you allocate the goods or the services, people actually provide the services in the way you expect them to, or deliver the goods in the right format with the right level of quality, etc., etc. But it's not obviously not true in the real world. You can't get perfect goods and you can't get perfect services. And also can be computationally complex, as you mentioned. So, for example, combinatorial auctions, where you have to go through lots of combinations of goods and services, lots of combinations of agents and allocations of agents to goods. It's very hard in the real world. So you might want to look for a satisfying solution. You might not want to look for a solution that's efficient, budget balanced, individual rational, or incentive compatible. You try and find a solution that does sort of has achieve something that is close enough to the optimal solution. Maybe you assume that the agents, you won't be able to compute an efficient allocation, you won't have the time to compute the optimal allocation, and therefore you let the market decide. So you present to the agents the information about the prices and let them react to the prices. A good example would be a stock market. A stock market scales. You have thousands of bidders and people and sellers at all times, and it scales really well. But it's very, very chaotic. You get very chaotic behaviors in the system. So there are trade-offs. So you have systems that scale well, systems that don't scale well, systems that scale well that are chaotic, and those systems that don't scale well that are efficient. So you need to try and find a balance between the two if you're trying to develop something for the real world that you think is going to work. Okay, that's to do with mechanism design. Coalition formation is another way of organizing agents, coordinating agents. In particular here, you're looking at a discrete optimization problem. So what you do is that you have a set of agents, right? This is the coalition formation problem. You have a set of agents, humans, in this case, in the case of a human agent collective. You say that each group of agent or human has a certain value, okay? Pairing agent B and C and D together has value 10, pairing agent B and C together has value 5, agent A on its own has value 0, agent B on its own has value 1, to the system. So you compute those values, and your goal here is to try and maybe enumerate all those kind of coalitions, so that will be the coalition value calculation problem. Or you will try and compute the coalition structure, the optimal coalition structure. So how do you partition the set of agents into groupings that have maximum value as a whole? So when you sum all their values, they give you the maximum value. How do you partition them? So that's a big problem that has been addressed. So that was the problem where I talk about, we found a solution for 15 agents and then for 20 agents, and now the top is 28 agents. It's a very difficult problem. It's a highly combinatorial problem, and that's even harder than a combinatorial exchange or combinatorial auction problem. And then once you say you manage to solve that, then you might need to ensure that those agents stay within their coalitions, and that's where you talk about sort of the payoff distribution problem. So you need to make sure that they're incentivized to stay in there by making sure that the incentive they get in a given group are better than the incentive they get from another group. And computing this is even harder than the coalition structure generation problem. Okay? So the enumeration problem goes in O to the n, and the coalition structure generation goes in O(n) to the n. And when you try to compute solutions that are stable or fair, so stable would be a Shapley value computation, and so stable would be the core solution, and Shapley would be a fair solution. So look up these terms if you want to know more about coalition formation. Then you hit a much more complex, much more exponential computation problem. And the issues here are obvious. All coalitions are not feasible. You can't assign a value to every possible grouping of agents. You have a computational complexity problem. And particularly, coalition values are typically undefined. Who says that agent A and agent B has value X? How do you give a value to coalition in the real world? I have struggled for the last 10 years to find a problem where I can say a coalition has value X. It's been very, very hard. And a number of researchers are talking about this. How do we actually give value to a coalition based on a set of characterization of the environment, of the performances of the agent? And the model you come up with typically is very unrealistic. So how do you find a realistic problem where the value is very well defined? And therefore, the field remains mostly theoretical today. So you may have attended the session on cooperative games this morning, and you've attended this one, and you'll see people keep talking about in terms of theory and very, very little in terms of practice. The other way of doing multi-agent coordination would be decops. So you would take a problem, define the problem in terms of a selection of assignments of values to variables. So you say, we have X number of variables and we need to give them some values, and based on these assignments, we'll get a certain utility. And in decops, what you do is you take each variable, you give it to an agent. So in this case, in this picture there, x1, x2, x4, 3, x4 are the variables. And your goal is to try to send messages between these agents. So the agents are the blobs. The agents send messages in order to converge on an assignment of values to these x's, so that the sum of the utility for the agent is maximized. So an assignment of x1 to, say, 3 gets a utility of 10. An assignment of x1 to value 2 gives the system utility of 20. So you do that for all the combination of variables. And the key challenge here is that x1 and x2 are constrained, so maybe you cannot have x1 assigned to value 10. You need to, if x2 is assigned to value 5, you have this constraint defined in the system, so you need to find an optimal solution within these constraints. And you send these messages around. And obviously, since you're sending lots of messages around, the sort of techniques that have been designed have attempted to prune the graph, so remove the constraints that don't make sense, reduce the number of messages. And there are a number of algorithms you'll hear about if you start doing research in this area. So adopt is the most famous one. This was actually designed by a guy from USC during his PhD. It's very, very popular. Depop was also designed by someone during his PhD at the PFL. Maxim and BNB adopt on newer algorithms, currently more well known for real-world applications, actually. And one real application I'm showing you here is something we actually played with at Southampton. Is an application where we had a number of unmanned aerial vehicles coordinating to assign targets to each other. So you have in this, I'm sure you can see that here, the two camera views at the top are from the two UAVs, and they're attempting to find targets on the map at the bottom here. Basically, there's a target here, there's a target there, and the two UAVs, they negotiate within themselves among these three tasks. So that's actually there were three targets. So they send values to each other, denoting how much it's going to cost in terms of fuel, how much time it's going to take them to move to a certain position, until they agree on an assignment of tasks to minimize the time taken, to minimize the fuel cost, etc. And it's just a very simple problem that you can solve with the decop, and you can exchange messages to achieve. The problem here is that it's not clear whether we could have solved this problem with the central optimization. Was it really useful to have Maxim in there? How much did it bias in terms of robustness? Not clear. We know that decentralized solutions are more robust, but are the benefits very, very clear? I'm not sure in those terms. In terms of being able to add, to grow the system, so if you have a distributed solution like this one, you can just drop in a new agent, you can drop in a new task, and the system adapts very easily. Very easily meaning you need to do some work with the network relating them, but it can be more easily done than if you have a centralized approach. And typically the main problem is that they assume the world is linear, and it's obviously not. The last one I'm going to talk about is the multi-agent Markov decision process. So that's a decision theoretic approach to solving coordination problems. It captures the world as a set of states that you can move between by executing certain actions, and your effect on the world is uncertain. So you're not sure what you're going to get. So these are dictated by reward distributions and transition probabilities. And the problems with NDPs typically is that they're very computationally complex. I'm not going to go deeper into this because many people just talk about two-agent problems. For me, this is not a very interesting multi-agent problem. But you can scale up to more than two easily by doing some approximations, but then you lose all the nice theoretical properties. And also the reward functions are hard to capture. Now to summarize, this is a table I wanted to draw up with you so that you get a sense of where these things are useful, so you can think of directions you might want to go into in your research when you try to do, if you want to go into multi-agent coordination. So if you have a problem where the agents need to be incentivized to take some course of action, you will probably apply a different solution, a different technique than to a problem where an agent cannot achieve goals on their own, so the consideration is quite different in this problem. And similarly, if the agents are constrained by other agents' action naturally, you will apply a different technique as well. So the sort of my mapping of solution techniques to these problems is as follows. So if you are thinking about incentives, you obviously think about mechanism design or cooperative game theory. If you're thinking about putting people together and having to then blend together different modes in time to achieve their goals, you think about coalition formation. If they're constrained by other agents' actions, then you think about coalition formation decouples multi-agent Markov decision processes. And if the rewards for actions are uncertain, then you think about coalition formation or Markov decision processes. Okay? Now, come to the interesting bit. A challenge problem for you guys. We are going to try, as a collective, to build a humanity collective or design a humanity collective. And a humanity collective for disaster response. So the problem is quite obvious will be quite obvious from what we've seen in the earlier slides. It's the disaster response problem. You have an environment that has changed significantly. People are dotted around the space, reporting information from the ground, analyzing satellite pictures and tagging things on the pictures, right? You have human responders on the ground using UAVs to get imagery, or satellites, or mobile phone reports from people on the ground, or from online websites such as Oshihigi. They are coming as teams, they are coming at different points in time, they are using planes, they have different communication equipment. They have tablets and all sorts of devices, cameras on their helmets, etc. And they have different capabilities in particular here. Okay, so that's what these pictures are meant to reflect. So some have better transportation capabilities than others, some have better cameras than others, some have better experience about dealing with the environment than others. And similarly with the UAVs, you might have different UAVs of different types. So you have a number of challenges that you need to address. You have a task allocation challenge. So you need to find out where people are. This is a situational awareness task. So you need to find out where people are, how is the disaster unfolding, and here we're going to think of a disaster such as an earthquake, okay? So this is the setting. Your goal is to find out where people are, deliver supplies, and save lives. And it needs to be a team effort. Different people have got different capabilities and need to be brought together at different points in time to solve this problem. You need to make these decisions under significant uncertainty about the location of the tasks, the particular people that need to be saved, the resources that you need to acquire. The environment might be highly uncertain, so you might have some radioactive deposits somewhere that are spilling into the atmosphere and contaminating food and harming people. And you might have uncertainty about people's performance, so maybe team performance may be uncertain, so you're not sure whether a team of A and B, humans in this case, who don't know each other, will perform equally well as well as a team of B and C who know each other, have been working a long time with each other. So how do you make sure that you make the right decisions under such uncertainty? The questions we have here are, How do we optimize the allocation of teams of responders with different roles, different capabilities, tasks, and a significant uncertainty? How can humans and software agents collaborate to optimize this allocation of tasks? So how can you build an agent for this team of humans to go on the ground and allocate tasks to each other? Then you have technical challenges. How do you evaluate these human agent collectives in disaster response? And how do you design meaningful interactions to support such collectives? How do you make sure that the interaction between humans and agents and humans and humans, maybe you have coordinator somewhere, maybe you have distributed coordination, maybe you have the teams agreeing on meeting at certain points in time. Could be a number of ways of interacting between themselves, but also interacting with an agent. Maybe they each have an agent, maybe you have a central agent which plans for them. Depends on what you want to come up with. Okay, so we're going to have 3 teams. Team A is going to be the agent team. Your task is to develop an agent-based system to advise emergency responders as to what tasks to perform in this disaster setting. You will have to design an agent to help you find where the civilians are, carry the civilians to base, and each civilian might require a number of responders to help, so you might need more than one responder. And your big questions are going to be about deciding whether you go for a decentralized, centralized approach to design your agent-based system. Assumptions about human movement, decision-making you're going to make in your agent or agents, and what instructions you will send to them, how you will send these instructions to them. Team B is going to be the human team. You're going to have to develop interaction mechanisms for humans to interact with the agent or agents. You might want to assume a mobile or Google Glass interface. You will need to develop sort of the kind of instructions agents will send to humans, and maybe instructions humans will send to agents. You need to decide on when they will instruct and how to instruct. The interface to be used for situational awareness, so how to represent where people are, where the resources are, how you represent that on a web-based interface or mobile interface. An interface for coordinated interaction. So if you're sending messages to coordinate them, how do you show them how they will be coordinated? What are they trying to achieve as a team? And here again, the questions are about, do you go for a centralized approach, a decentralized approach? How do you shape the instructions? And how do you account for change of plans? When things go wrong, what do you do? They don't achieve what they meant to achieve. What do they do? They don't like the plans that have been computed to them. What do you do? How do you deal with that? Okay. And the final bit is on the crowdsourcing team. Don't know if you have enough. Should work. So crowdsourcing team will develop a crowdsourcing platform to help disaster responders gather information on the ground. Collect information from satellites, from mobile phones, from online social networking sites. Classify tasks for the emergency responders and visualize those classified tasks on an interface. Then the key questions you need to address here: how are you going to crowdsource this? What's the workflow of crowdsourcing? You had a flavor of the find, fix, verify design pattern. Can you apply this? In this case, can you come up with your own? What sort of incentives will you give the crowd? Will you pay them, or since it's an event, maybe you won't pay them? Maybe you pay some of them to do certain things. And finally, what sort of algorithms will you use to identify untrustworthy crowd members? So you've been to the trust modeling lecture yesterday. Maybe you can use some of those ideas. Okay, so we're going to go outside on the terrace, and we're going to choose one team leader for each team. The team leader will sit at his table, or her table. You're going to discuss with a set of, so some of you guys, so 5 at a table at a time. So 4 are the members of this crowd for 5 minutes, and you change teams. So you discuss this question in the sheet I'm going to give you, and then change team after 15 minutes of discussion. So the 4 people who come to the table beside the team leader go to the other table, and there's an order I've described in the paper, so you know which table you're going to next. And then at the end, the team leaders will collect all the evidence and sort of all the findings for the key models, and then present this to everyone. So let's go outside and do this.
Oh, look at this. Yeah, no. That's for the left.